Hello, people, and we are up today, and I will tell you why. Got some really good news despite the stock market being down. The stock market's down because of some new tariffs, but we are up in crypto because we have a new executive order that will allow 401k investment into cryptos. Now, there's already the IBIT thing, so it's not completely new. But those are more like IRA investments, and 401k is just another category. It's a lot like IRAs, but 401ks, I think more companies offer company mandated and funded 401ks. And asset managers have been pushing Congress to allow, I guess, like more riskier investments and creative investments into 401ks. Now, is this really like a good thing? I don't really know. 401ks, I mean, it's good for crypto. Let's get that out of the way. But is it really good for like the 401ks themselves? I don't really know. I think it could actually let them get a higher ROI, but at the same time, it's exposing them to more risk, which could be bad for 401ks because 401ks are supposed to be a nest egg. They're not really supposed to take on really speculative investments. They're supposed to take on things like the S&P 500 index. But Bitcoin has been a very good investment for a long time, so there's a lot to say about that. Imagine you put $1,000 into a Bitcoin 401k 15 years ago. You'd be completely set now for life. So there's a lot of argument to be made there for 401ks and IRAs. But anyways, this executive order doesn't say like you're going to invest in Bitcoin 401ks right now. However, it does actually say that they're going to revisit SEC rules that may prohibit these 401ks from investing in Bitcoin and crypto. And it's not completely targeted for Bitcoin and crypto. It does actually let them have private equity as well. And private equity is like, personal deals like, non-publicly listed companies. And yes, those are a bit riskier than buying, the Mag 7 or something like like Magnificent 7 and things like that. But also very much have higher ROI potential. So that is an executive order that he signed. They're going to start looking into that. They're going to start basically revising some of the rules, and the revising of the rules will actually allow other coins, investments like cryptos to get into the 401ks. It's like a $12 trillion industry. So even a very, very small portion of that can pump up crypto greatly. So hopefully, I think that is the reason why we actually went up today. Can't be 100% sure. It could just be a bounce back from the weekend or last weekend, but I think that is why we are up for today. Now, to go along with that, I think for crypto onboarding, Trump is going to sign an executive order punishing financial institutions for debanking. Now, crypto had actually debanking issues for a long time, stretching back up to like 2016, 2017. So obviously Trump's done a 180 on basically crypto himself, and he's not going to allow banks to basically debank you because you are investing in crypto. Trump's executive order comes as a group of bank associations are trying to block bank applications from 4 digital asset firms. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to sign an executive order on Thursday instructing federal bank regulators to identify and fine financial institutions that engage in debanking. According to Bloomberg on Thursday, citing a senior White House official, regulators will be required to review complaint data, while financial institutions under the purview of Small Business Administration will be asked to make efforts to reinstate clients who were unlawfully denied banking services. Debanking has been a key concern among some political groups who argue that businesses such as gun manufacturers and fossil fuel companies have been denied banking services for ideological reasons. It was also a common complaint among crypto companies during the administration of former President Joe Biden. Allegations emerged of new initiative called Operation Choke Point 2.0, which some believe was an attempt to drive crypto businesses offshore during the 2022 bear market. That a lot of that happened after FTX. Despite the change in tone under the Trump administration, allegations of debanking have persisted. But hopefully the EO will stop that. And, companies won't be afraid to deal in crypto anymore. So that is basically really, really good news for crypto. And I think that really did help a little bit, at least, crypto bounce back in the last day or two. Ethereum is back above 3,900. And we're looking for that almighty $4,000 break. I do think Ethereum does have to go above 4K for the rest of the cryptos to really catch up. Everything's been doing very well. Ethereum's up 6, XRP's up 12, BNB's up 2, Solana's up 4, Cardano's up 7, Doge is up 8, XLM follows XRP, so it's up 14.5, Sui's up 8, Link is up 12, MNT is up like 20 something, but I'm not really sure what Mantle is actually doing right now, but they seem to have some good news going there. But I think the average gain for cryptos is about 6-7%. XRP is obviously outperforming, and that is because the lawsuit of the Ripple SEC is finally over. Yes, it's officially over. Both sides dropped their appeal. The SEC dropped its appeal that under Gary Gensler, and of course, Ripple dropped its cross appeal. Now, there's some ins and outs of this. Ripple got like a 5% pump over everything else because of this. And some of the other coins that follow Ripple, like that follow XRP, like XLM, did as well. But here's the thing: it's good, but it's not all roses because Ripple gave up their cross appeal, which means they will have to absorb the full $125 million penalty, which will be basically paid to the U.S. Treasury. And of course, they still cannot sell to institutions. That injunction is still there. So they might actually have to find another way to fund themselves. So yes, the lawsuit between Ripple and the SEC has officially ended as of August 7th, 2025. That's very, very good news for XRP investors. Both parties filed a joint stipulation of dismissal with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, ending the SEC's appeal and Ripple's cross appeal. This concludes the legal dispute that began in December 2020 when the SEC alleged that Ripple's sales of XRP constituted an unregistered securities offering. A key aspect of the resolution is a $125 million civil penalty Ripple has agreed to pay as a part of the settlement. This penalty will be transferred to the U.S. Treasury. Now, in the cross appeal, that penalty was kind of like reduced down to about 50 million, but they kind of got rid of that. So they're going to pay the 125 million and it will actually be paid in cash. The penalty will be transferred to the US Treasury and a permanent injunction restricting Ripple's institutional sales of XRP remains in effect. So they can only sell via exchanges. I think they'll probably find some way around this. They can only sell via exchanges. They cannot sell directly to institutions. The dismissal of appeal finalizes the 2023 ruling from Judge Annalisa Torres, so it's been about 2 years since this, which found that Ripple's sales of XRP on public exchanges did not constitute securities, but institutional sales did violate securities laws. So essentially, you can sell on Coinbase, Binance, etc. You cannot sell directly to institutions because those are securities. The end of this long-running legal battle is a significant event for the cryptocurrency industry and is expected to provide greater regulatory clarity for XRP and potentially influence how other digital assets are treated under U.S. securities laws. Bitcoin and Ethereum basically have a pass. The SEC really hasn't sued anyone else. They have a couple of smaller coins, but with the SEC stance growing looser and looser on cryptos, I don't think they're going to sue like Cardano or Solana. They already dropped the case against Binance and all those other things, and the US is essentially opening up to crypto. This was expected, which is why you're not seeing a massive pump from XRP, because once Gary Gensler stepped down, this basically was all set in stone. Now, still, a 5% rise over other alts is pretty nice, but I still think it's going to depend on how high Ethereum rises right now. I don't expect, a massive pump like they had back in December when Gary Gensler stepped down, because that kind of caught fire when the market was going way, way up. And also Gensler stepping down, that basically signaled to people that, the legal troubles were essentially over. Since they already have that, I don't think this particular settlement is really going to rise the price that much. They got a nice boost. It might actually deflate back down after a while. We'll see if this actually results in any actual adoption. A boost, I kind of doubt that. I do think Ripple's long-term plan is worth RLUSD and not XRP. And yes, about 80% of RLUSD is minted on Ethereum, with XRP taking about 6%, XRP Ledger taking about 6% of the supply, and the other portion of the supply is kind of saturated on other chains. But Ethereum does actually have the lion's share of RLUSD, and I think that's more Ripple's future, especially with cross-border payments. I do think they're trying to do more public development with the XRP Ledger, but I'm not really sure how that's actually going. going at this point. They're trying to do like some kind of institutional RWA, but their XRP is still their war chest. So they're not really going to let that coin go to zero. You're still good for another at least several years if you actually like invested in XRP. It'll continue to go up and down with the market because like they have like a $40 billion war chest that they're not, well, it's more than $40 billion now, that they actually are not just going to let go to zero. Now, when they actually IPO, they're not going to count that as the full price of the escrow in their valuation because you can't sell it and liquidate it immediately. And you can only like, and obviously you can only release 100, I think like what, 1 billion of the escrow per month. And they don't really sell all that. They do actually take some of that back. So this is actually like really good for Ripple. I think this does actually pave the way for maybe an IPO. If they do, I'm wondering how much it'll be worth. It's probably going to be pretty close to what Circle is worth, is my guess. I mean, RLUSD is nowhere as big as USDC, but they do have all that XRP in escrow. But like I said, it's going to be harder for them to sell because they can't actually directly sell to institutions. They would actually have to sell it through an exchange. But it's good that we got some resolution. I think the SEC and other organizations are going to use this as guidance going forward. And I think in the next 3.5 years, you're not going to see too much trouble, more or less, with crypto and regulations because this particular administration is like, very, very friendly towards crypto. Trump obviously is trying to become like, I guess, a really crypto-friendly president, trying to make the U.S. kind of like this, I guess, the crypto haven of the world and bring back a lot of the crypto business to the United States. So it's really good that we finally got this kind of like out of the way. And this should be a signal that pretty much there's not really going to be any more lawsuits. This with the executive order that like, pension and funds can actually buy crypto, I think gives crypto a lot more clarity, and it does paint a more bullish picture. But of course, it still kind of like depends on the macros. I do think that we could definitely pump into the weekend because inflation numbers don't appear until next week, but the overall direction still depends on next week's inflation numbers. I'm hoping that inflation stays below 3. It went from 2.4 to 2.7 last month, and I'm hoping it doesn't go from 2.7 to 3 because I think that's going to be kind of like a cutoff thing for Jerome Powell, that if we are below 3 by September, he will cut rates. If we are above 3 come September, the next FOMC meeting, there's a good chance he will not cut rates. Trump did just nominate someone else for a Fed board governor, but that still makes the vote 8-3 at this point. And I do not think that the other governors will actually side with the people pushing for a rate cut if our interest rate is above 3%. Right now, it is actually 2.7. So we had better hope that those inflation rates stay low. The problem right now, as I've mentioned before in other videos, is that oil is no longer coming down in price. It's stabilized, and it's stabilized quite a bit above the mid-50s price it was back in May. It's like mid-60s price, and like we're looking at sanctions on Russia. But on the other hand, OPEC did agree to increase production at least until the end of September. So that should actually prevent prices from going up. I do think there is probably some deals with tariffs and stuff that that's part of the reason why they're agreeing to increase production at this point. So the sanctions on Russia won't actually hurt the gas price. However, if the war in Russia escalates, I do think eventually you can't really prevent that from basically hurting the oil price and making gas prices go up. I think Trump is meeting with Putin next week, but I'm not really sure how that's going to play out. Putin's always been pretty good at playing Trump, and I don't think he really cares about what everyone else says. He wants basically the war to go on because he wants to take more and more of Ukraine. And obviously, Ukraine is not willing to surrender, and Russia is taking some losses as well. Their economy is basically faltering at this point, but their central bank is basically keeping it afloat by having super high interest rates. Like their interest rates are 20-25%, which is like a lot more than our interest rate of, that people have been complaining about. Our interest rate is like, 4 or 5%. There's a 20, 25%, but they have more direct control over the economy. So that can go on for quite a long time. Hopefully there is some kind of resolution to the conflict, not just for the markets, but for the people over there as well. But that doesn't look too likely. But oil prices should actually stay a little bit lower, and that could help inflation from going ham crazy. So if that is true and inflation doesn't go ham crazy, I definitely think that we're in line for a couple of rate cuts, and that hopefully will spike the market. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.